Okay, we are live, Chair.
Diolch, Darian. Bore da. Morning, everybody. And welcome to this meeting with the Powys Pension Board. I think nearly everybody's here. There's one to arrive, perhaps, but we'll press on and start the meeting formally. I think we haven't got any apologies for absence.
Nope.
And the declarations of interest, Chris, I don't think there's anything there which we need to declare on, is there?
I've not been advised of any changes, Chair, so hopefully all is as it was previously.
Yeah. And okay, we've got I've just lost some of my documents.
I can bring them up on the screen as well, Chair, if it's easier.
If you like, but yeah, I've got them back now. But
at least we're all looking at the same page, aren't we? Then, if that's it, if everyone's happy.
If we'd like to share, yeah. Yeah, it'd be quite easy to easier to go through the minutes like that.
So, are you looking at the agenda there?
We are.
Great. Okay, making sure I'm showing the right screen. That's perfect.
I don't know if you can get rid of the side. That's it.
Like that. Is that big enough?
One more would be good.
How's that?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. So yeah, minutes of the board first, and this is our last meeting on the 18th of November, and I think today we've got a couple of meaty items to follow, so perhaps we can skim through some of the minutes, and lots of the stuff arising in the minutes of the board and the committee will be coming back to hit us later in the meeting anyway. So yeah, so we'll just take these minutes. Anyone got any corrections to begin with? I've been through them, and I think I just gave Rachel one or two tweaks, but on minute 13, Chris, that's on page 10 of the pack.
Yeah.
The last thing before item 14, it says the oversight contract is closed and decision is due next month. Is that, have Hymans been reappointed there, or is that ongoing?
I don't know how to answer that one, Chair.
Okay.
Because it's not a procurement exercise carried out by me. I was involved in it, but it's a WPP appointment. I'm not sure where the process is. I think it's concluded, but I think it'd be wrong for me to announce anything.
Yeah, sure.
Go from the WPP.
Sorry, I should have given you a notice of that.
No, that's fine. No problem.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing any hands up or noises, so I presume everyone's happy and we can just note that as a proper record and move on to the committee meeting minutes. And there are two meetings, the 27th of November one first, and this was very much after the Mansion House announcements from the Chancellor, and what's happening on that at the time.
Yeah, so I can update board on the developments since then as part of one of the later items, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. That's
one of the meaty items you talked about. Yeah,
the meatiest, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
So if everyone's happy with that minutes, then there was one 13th of December, and yeah, that was to approve things, wasn't it? And yeah, again, Mansion House, etc. So
So the
we've got
November meeting was primarily to approve the annual report, but we did touch on the Mansion House speech because that was a hot topic at the time. This is where I went into a bit more detail with the Mansion House speech.
yeah,
This is the main meeting, this one.
and we will do so again today. So
Yes.
And things on the WPP updates, we'll have an update again today as well.
Yeah.
But we did, as a committee, we had Waystone and Russell there present and the opportunity to question them on that day, which was quite it was a convivial meeting, but we challenged them on a few things as well. So
yeah,
everyone happy with that? So if we note those meetings minutes, move on to 17th of January. And I didn't attend this. This was a hastily arranged date when I was in the Caribbean at the time, so I wasn't able to connect. But it was more to do with responsible investment beliefs. And the members, I believe, had a good meeting with Aon.
Yeah, very, very good. The board might be aware that obviously we have 4 standard committee meetings a year, but because responsible investment is such an important topic to discuss, we were struggling to fit it onto the regular meeting agenda. So we're calling 2 extra committee meetings a year to look at responsible investment. This was the first one of them, and it took 2.5 hours. So you can imagine trying to fit a 2.5 hour chunk of a meeting into a main meeting. It doesn't work. So very, very good discussions held. Lots of discussion around an approach to net zero. What have we done? What are we planning on doing? And we are close to revisiting a revised or an updated responsible investment policy. So at some point this year, over the next few months, we'll see a revised responsible investment policy for the fund, which will likely come via the board in the first instance for comment as well. So you should see that before too long.
So since our last meeting, I think we've also had the meeting with the actuary on the valuation and really bringing together the valuation and responsible investments. I think the general tendency with pensions committees and their beliefs, etc., is that once they reach beyond 100% funded, they become, their risk appetite changes a little bit to be more willing to take on a little bit of risk for to improve the world as well as just get returns.
Yeah.
And I think the feedback I got that some of the members were feeling, yeah, well, we need to get our responsible investment hat on, perhaps more so going forward than in the past.
Absolutely, yeah. The training piece then on investing in areas of conflict. Obviously, we've experienced that through the news and whatnot over recent months and years. So we had a training session from Aon on how investing in these areas works. That was an educational piece for the committee, which was quite interesting. And natural capital as well. That's something that seems to be creeping onto the radar in terms of investment opportunities now as well. So a bit of an educational piece on how natural capital might fit into an investment strategy as well. So it's quite a good meeting, actually. Very, very interesting.
Indeed, yeah. I think WPP will have an offer for us to invest in Brycheiniog Forest if we see fit in the future. But that would be interesting to have an investment on home ground, which rarely gives us a good opportunity. But, yeah. So that's, well, yeah, that's the end of the minutes, unless someone got a question or a comment. So all quiet. We'll take those as read and approved, and move on to the first substantive item, which is the Pension Regulator Code of Practice, which Chris has produced the usual paper, and I'll allow you to present it, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start with a bit of a preface on this one, I haven't been able to revisit this as much as I would like to because of developments since November. My hands have been very full in trying to respond to consultations and whatnot. However, I have revisited it and I haven't changed any of the scores, but I have updated some of the commentary um, attached to some of the questions within this toolkit. The first thing I need to say is, as we scroll down, you'll see some strike throughs in the text. So just please ignore those strike throughs. It's not because things have been deleted or removed. It's simply a formatting error when extracting the PDF from the Excel file. So apologies if these strike throughs have confused you when you were scanning through the documentation. It's simply a presentation thing, not that anything has been deleted. So as I mentioned, I haven't been through and changed any of the scores. And there's another reason for that as well, which I'll come on to in a later item as well. But what I have done is I have updated some commentary. So I thought what I might focus on, just at a high level for this document, for this item, is just looking at the actions column there on the right half of the screen. This is commentary I've basically input into the tool whilst working through it to say I think we need to develop this or strengthen this, revisit this. The regulator is seeking more evidence as part of this new general code. In the past, we've been able to just simply say, yes, we've got a policy for that. We have a policy for that, and here's a hyperlink for it. They're looking for more than that now. And an example would be, for example, if we have a question around dealing with overpayments, they want to know which section of the policy, what page, for example, is it on. So there's quite a lot of work in us going through these 100 or so questions and being quite specific with our evidencing. So that's the kind of thing I've picked out whilst working through it, just to remind myself and colleagues that we need to provide some more evidence on this. So important to say, there's no red flags. I wasn't concerned with any of the detail. I don't think we've got anything that's really missing, but I think we have got areas that we can strengthen when it comes to this evidencing piece, which is what we'll focus on over the coming months. So that's what these comments in the action area are covering, really. The first one is talking about reviewing against the requirements in the Good Governance Project. Now, the Good Governance Project has been talked about for years, and we were pleased to see that it's actually been included as part of the consultation that was launched by the government in November. So part of the LGPS Fit for the Future consultation, they've bolted on the good governance work that the Scheme Advisory Board have done to the end of that consultation. So we think it's going to be here probably this year in legislation. So it's just an acknowledgement saying, let's wait and see what comes out of the consultation. Once we know what is expected of us, we'll revisit this point and update it accordingly. The next one is talking about remuneration for fund officers and the fund. And it's basically suggesting or asking the question, have you got a remuneration policy for the fund? Well, the answer is no. It's not a requirement under the code, but it is in line with the best practice that the regulator recommends. Obviously, as council officers, I'm tied to the council's pay structure and whatnot. So I think there's probably a need for us just to document that and say that's how it works. We haven't got that in place at the minute. I think that's quite an easy fix and something we can do. But that's the kind of additional evidencing we're going to have to do from now on. Of course, with additional evidencing requires additional review. So there'll be quite a big piece of work to revisit this and review this periodically, I think. So that was it, really. I didn't really want to pick out any specific concerns. There's an area on cybersecurity, which is an item later on in the agenda, which I'll pick up later on. We need to strengthen how we document and record things when it comes to cybersecurity, but I'll take board through that later. So unless there's any questions on the document itself, I hadn't intended really to take board through it in any more detail, apart from to say, let's look at these actions. These are what I've documented whilst working through it. And just to give you the reassurance that there's nothing in there that concerns me. There's no red flags that we need to jump on straight away, apart from perhaps just strengthening our cybersecurity policy documentation, which we'll cover later on. So that was really it, Chair. Obviously, I'm happy to dive into it in a bit more detail if you feel you want to, or take any questions that the board might have. But that's all I was intending to deliver on this item.
Yeah, well, clearly we've had the presentation of this document before, and the scores are the same. So there's certainly no need to dive into there. With the actions, I think I certainly appreciate that Chris has been busy. When he says busy with consultations, it's a bit more than a consultation, really. It's a challenge to the whole future of LGPS pooling and how we invest. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment with several work streams I know Chris is involved in. So it's not sort of he's not been sitting on his hands thinking what shall I do today. It's been all hands to the pump in recent months. Yeah, so those actions seem logical, and I can see some of them. Yeah, that it would, as there's so many details to sort of reference. It can be quite a bit of work sometimes to quote chapter and verse. Can I ask you a question on one, Chris? In terms of, page 45 at the bottom there, under communication disclosure.
Yes.
It says all detail on board members published except job title. What does that entail there, job title?
We had this conversation with the previous chair. It came up, I think, because of an expectation within the regulators code about the details of the board membership, and it was felt as though there wasn't really any need to publish a board member's job title. The fact that the name and I think some contact details are there, that was felt to be sufficient. So it was just documenting that really, and just to acknowledge that whilst it's in the code, we've discussed it, and that was the decision taken at the time. So simply, it was felt it was an unnecessary detail.
Right. Yeah. So it would be the background of the board member, if it's farmer, lawyer,
yeah,
accountant, whatever, rather than any specific role on the board. Then.
Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I can't see any hands up again. And as we said, we've done this before.
Yeah. It is an item later on in the agenda. Oh, actually, David's got his hand up. But if we get time at the end of the agenda, then we can revisit some of these on screen. Was the intention? But we'll have to see how we get on for time on that one.
Yes, yeah.
Just a broad question, if I can, Chris, if that's okay, Chair. Just looking at it overall, Chris, does this change the amount of resources you're going to need to run the fund?
Yes. The short answer, David, and I had intended to pick that up as part of one of the items, I think, on the legislation update.
Okay.
So I'll take you through a bit more detail, but yes, this will be part of somebody's job essentially to have to review this more detail.
Just the scale of it. I just wondered, Chris, because it's something I think the board needs to be putting it frankly. We obviously we'll test and challenge, but support as well if this is something that's really self-evident.
No, I appreciate that, David. Yeah, I think the intention would be that once we get somebody, probably won't be me, would come along to these meetings, they'll be able to present this in more detail because they will be in this on a daily basis as well. But we'll pick that up on one of the later items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. I was tempted to mention that aspect, but I knew Chris was getting to it later as well. So there's so much going on, isn't there? And yeah, the requirements, not options. Okay, so with that, happy to move on to accept the report and move on to the admin updates.
Thank you, Chair. Again, because we've mentioned this a couple of times, because of the meaty nature of the agenda, I hadn't intended to go through this in any detail, but I thought I would just pull out just one not anomaly, but one difference that board might have spotted, and that's to do with the November column. You'll see that the income in terms of employer contributions and employee contributions is higher than the month either side. And Graham can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's to do with a retrospective pay award. Obviously, with contributions being a percentage, as pay goes up, the contributions go up in line with that as well. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that one because on the bottom row, that looks like the odd one out, the November column there. But I think it's something to do with the retrospective pay award. I believe that's right. Graham, was paid in November.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
The national pay awards were agreed.
Oh, we've lost Graham, but I think he was agreeing with me before we lost him, which is
He was, yeah.
Which is pleasing, yeah. I think he was going to provide some additional detail behind that, but yeah, it's to do with the retrospective pay award. So that was the only thing I wanted to draw committee's attention, the board's attention to on this paper, if that's okay, Chair. The usual statistics there in terms of scheme membership and employers. presented for
Yeah,
information.
thanks.
Yeah,
Oh, Graham,
backdated to
sorry, Graham's
April,
back,
so
yeah.
it's all year.
Sorry, Gray, you dropped. I think he's having connection issues, isn't he? Unfortunately.
I think I'm back now, am I?
Oh yes, there you are. I can
I
hear you.
don't know.
again.
It went out completely. Yeah, yeah. The November. Yeah, it is the National Pay Awards for staff covered by the LGPS, backdated to April. So all the arrears were paid in November as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Graham, for that. So that was all I really want to draw out of this report, Chair. But obviously, over to you, and happy to take any questions if there's anything that comes up.
I know in a previous meeting, Dave has mentioned he likes to see this summary. I think from my perspective, I'm wondering how meaningful it is just to have the 3 months, and I would probably be more rather than a snapshot of 3 months. I'd be more interested to see a year's data, or where we are start and end of the year, because you're going to have peaks and troughs up and down like that pay award and work in progress on any 1 month. So I perhaps might wish to see this less frequently with more duration in the data. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, can I come in, David? Yeah, I think that would be fine. I mean, I think the original discussion was one, and I remember, Chris, you and I had a discussion about this many years ago, was the cash flow issue for the fund. But
Yes.
And it's also, if somebody looked at this, and I think the board's concern was that if somebody looked at this, they'd say, oh, hang on a minute, you look at this, look at the bottom line. I mean, November's the anomaly, and that actually plays into David's point. It may be a longer time frame. Oh gosh, look, it's costing to run. It's not, because this is just one factor. This is just one
Absolutely
factor, obviously, and it's important that anybody, I guess, who's watching understands that this doesn't include the impact of investments, which is the key part of what you do, isn't it? Really, in a way.
Yeah.
But this is just cash flow, and I think that's just got to be emphasised. But actually, thinking about what David said, I think that sort of makes sense to me. I don't know if it's more work for you, Chris, but I can see where David's coming from.
It's absolutely makes no difference to me to run it at 3 months or 12 months, to be honest. So I'm happy to accommodate whatever board, if that board wish. So we could try it. We could see how it goes. We can always come back if we prefer the existing method. Yeah. So if you want me to make that change, we'll make that as an action, and I'll do that going forward.
We'll see what you can come up with, Chris. And
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, cash flow and including the investment income will be key going forward to the asset allocation in this round after the valuation as well. So it's an important aspect, but we need the whole picture for that strategy.
It is, and just following on from that one, just to give board some reassurances as well, because board might not be aware of this, but committee made a decision towards the end of last year to implement a cash flow policy strategy, essentially, for the next 10 to 15 years. So we had some work carried out where we've looked at the cash flow, and the fund's at a point where it's not quite cash flow negative yet, but it's borderline. So we've had to consider what's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years. And committee have approved a strategy to almost like a liability-driven investment vehicle. So we know what our liabilities are. We need to make sure we have the income coming in to match that. So it's a cash flow matching strategy, essentially. So it's, whilst you're only seeing one part of the picture here, as David correctly identifies, this is just the administration side of things. There's this whole other world around governance and investment which isn't included in this information. So yeah, leave that with me. I'll consider what we can do, and I'll present it next meeting.
On potential negative cash flow, our success might drive that to come closer in terms of if contributions happen to go down for the employer, there'll be less cash coming in. So I'm sure Aon have factored that into the calculations already to a degree, but things are still going pretty well on the asset side. So it could be victims of our own success in terms of the cash flow.
we have to make sure we take a prudent approach when it comes to valuation results, that's for sure. So yeah, obviously I'll keep board updated as and when those come in.
Yeah, Chris, yeah. Yeah, okay. So with those comments, happy to accept that and move on to the legislation and governance update, which is one of the more meaty ones, perhaps, Chris.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It never gets any shorter, this item. Only seems to be going in one direction. So there's a couple of things in here really that I wanted to draw out rather than focus on every bullet point. The key one really is around 2.2. The board will be aware that Chancellor announced the budget at the end of October 2024, and then a couple of weeks later in the Mansion House speech, the Chancellor announced a consultation called the LGPS Fit for the Future, which is specifically looking at investment pooling and investments within the LGPS. That's covered in a bit more detail in item 3, so I'll come on to that. But they did, off the back of the Mansion House speech, launch a couple of consultations, the Fit for the Future one, but another one which will have an impact on the administration team potentially, if it's actually implemented, is to do with inheritance tax on death benefits. This could be a potentially complicated area because it will require the administration teams in the LGPS to work closely with personal representatives to establish an individual's overall tax position, deduct tax accordingly, pay that across the HMRC as part of the accounting for tax procedures. If it's then discovered that the information was wrong, how do we reclaim any overpaid tax, or how do we contact estates and personal representatives that may have moved on from this matter? So there's quite a few things that have come out of the inheritance tax consultation that the admin officers within the LGPS in Wales have raised. So it'll be interesting to see if government pay attention to these concerns, these real strong concerns that the admin team have in any responses that they submit and any regulation they put into place. So we did issue a response to the consultation on inheritance tax, but that was done on a consolidated basis for the funds in Wales via the Pensions Officer Group, which went to the National Pensions Officer Group and then up to MHCLG and the government via that channel. So whilst it wasn't an individual Powys response, it was signed off as part of a group response from Wales, essentially. So just to give board that information, we did respond to that consultation. There's been an interim report on the first phase of the pensions review. Since the new government came into power last summer, they've been obviously looking at growth within the economy. That's been one of their priorities. And they've published their interim report following some information gathering exercises they've carried out. And it's available at the hyperlink for you to read. I'm not going to go into that in any detail. It's not my document, but just to make you aware that it's there for you to read. Sorry, I'm skipping through this, so please do stop me if there are any questions as I go. 2.3 is there for scheme member representative information, really. If Ian's here, then Ian, this will be what's interesting to you and your scheme members. Those are pay bands, and those are the contribution rates attached to each pay band from April. They're applicable from April. 2.4, McLeod. Couple of things that I just want to bring board up to date with on McLeod. A bit of background in the first 2 paragraphs there. What McLeod is essentially a remedy to make sure that scheme members who were in the certain window, 2014, active from 31st of March 2012 and up to 31st of March 2022, we have to carry out a check now, essentially to make sure that they're no worse off in the career average scheme than they would have been in the final salary scheme. But one of the big impacts on that is when the scheme changed to become a career average scheme, there was no longer a need to keep any hours because the calculation to work out somebody's pension benefits moved from a service-based calculation to simply dividing pay by 49. To implement this remedy, we need to revisit all these lines and re-input hours, part-time hours for those who are part-time, and then carry out the check. So that's quite a bit of work. We've identified thousands of lines of service history that we have to revisit. So the team have been looking at ways to try and do that a bit more efficiently, because what it means is if we're looking at a period of 8 to 10 years, part-time staff could have changed hours every year. So that means somebody's got to input 10 lines of part-time hour information. Somebody's then got to go in and check the calculation for 10 lines of part-time information. So the team have developed some tools to try and aggregate that. So rather than inputting 10 lines potentially, they've aggregated it into one using an average to try and speed up the input and the checking. but obviously keeping the detail there in the background should it need to be revisited for any more detail. But it's important to remember that the McLeod remedy is not going to make an individual's members' benefits worse. They're only going to go one way if we implement the remedy. It's only going to increase it. It's not going to be taking anything away. So we're comfortable in that approach, and we know that it's only going to bite in a very single-figure percentage numbers of occasions simply because the accrual rate within the career average scheme is much better than it was in the final salary scheme. So we don't expect it to bite very often. However, it's in regulation. We do have to carry out this exercise. That's the background. Where are we? Well, the regulations came into effect in October 23. So every new retirement or benefit that we calculate for anybody caught in this remedy period since then has had the McLeod remedy applied. So we know that every new calculation going out the door has been checked. The difficulty is with the historic ones. We're having to work through a backlog of cases going back to potentially those early dates. And that's where the challenge is. So the team are tackling those as and when they can. There's an expectation that we'll need to include something within the 2025 annual benefit statements around McLeod. And that's an awful lot of work for us to get through by then, when you factor in what else is going on outside the administration side of things as well. So we'll have to see how we get on. We have got some plans to try and push things on as much as we can, but we might be in a position where we find out that we're not able to include all the information for all scheme members within the 2025 annual benefit statements. We'll have to consider how we record that and whether it's reportable to the regulator as well. So that's one additional complication we've got this year. Having said that, we did find ourselves in the same position last year, and the government pushed through some regulations to push the deadline on. So we could see that happening again. It probably won't happen again this year. We probably had our chance last year. So that's something we'll have to consider, that when we produce annual benefit statements in the summer, we'll have to consider how we tackle that for those who haven't got the McLeod information in there that the regulator expects.
Just to give you a chance to get your wind back, Chris,
A lot of talking.
Lots on this. Yeah, McLeod, I think it's a lot of checking for admin staff in every pension scheme, and it's not just LGPS, it's across the whole public sector. In the LGPS, as you say, it doesn't actually impact on many cases, the remedy. It was originally due to, perhaps you could say, poorly drafted legislation in terms of not taking cognizance of age discrimination, but I do have some sympathy for the civil servants who drafted it, because how do you draft something for pensions without referring to age? It's a strange one, but yeah, so the remedy unfortunately does mean a lot of recalculation, and I think perhaps it's something like for every 1,000 recalculations you may find one.
Yeah.
Which so it's a lot of work. I think it's also across the whole pensions industry. I think there's a realization that even though we've had this sort of year's grace, most, if not all, scheme administrators will probably still be working on this past the September 25 deadline. 2025 has come around very quickly, with several deadlines in it, and yeah, I think probably we need to just note that probably we'll have to note a breach again, that we haven't reached that. If the government give us further extension of time, so be it. But
yeah.
I think I've been reassured outside of the meeting that we're doing everything we can on this in the circumstances, but there's just so much work on it, and it's certainly not unique to Powys or the LGPS. It's actually worse in the fire, because there's more, it impacts on more pensioners due to the nature of the scheme. But
yeah, that's fair comment. Thank you for making that point, Chair. I should have pointed out at the start, this isn't unique to Powys. We're all in this together across the pensions industry. So yeah, we're all, as a collective, pension professionals, trying to work our way through this. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I'll just pick up point 3 then, which is talking about the consultation on the LGPS Fit for the Future. Board will be aware that There was a consultation issued on the 14th November, which the fund responded to. I think I copied you in on the responses and the drafting and whatnot. So this consultation was looking at investments and pooling within the LGPS specifically, with the good governance bit bolted on at the end. So what the proposal does is it does change the way that pooling works within the LGPS for some pools. They've essentially set out some minimum standards which they expect pools to meet to satisfy their requirements. Things like being an FCA regulated entity and having all assets under pool management by the 31st of March 2026, which is just over 12 months away. So we responded to the consultation saying, we haven't got very long to sort this out. You're giving us a list of minimum requirements. If you want us to meet those, it's going to be a challenge, but we're going to have a go. So we responded along those lines and pointed out areas of difficulty. Things like taking investment advice from the pools as well, rather than having independent local advice, which we pointed out was probably something we want to think about, because potential conflicts of interest. If the pool are giving advice on something they're offering, potential conflicts there, for example. So I think we set out a fairly detailed, comprehensive response. And in terms of where we are with regards to pooling all assets by 31st of March 2026, we're about between 70 and 75% pooled currently. And those that aren't pooled are simply the ones that are long-term in nature, things like private markets, investments, or with our hedge funds, because the pool hasn't offered a solution, a sub-fund for us to be able to transition our hedge funds across yet. So there's a reason for that 30% or so being outside the pool or under pool management. It's because we've not been able to do it yet. And one thing we pointed out in our response is some of these investments are long-term in their nature and they cost to get out of it. If you want us to pool everything by the 31st of March 2026, then there could be a fire sale and it could be potentially costly to do so. So we just made the recommendation, look, for these long-term investments, it's probably best just to let them run off. And once they've run off, any new investments are made via the pool. So that's how we responded to the 31st of March 26 proposal. But that's all I really want to say at this part of the meeting. There is a further update later on in terms of what we're doing at a pool level. But I'm happy to take any comments, or if the chair wants to add any further comments at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We can get into it in more detail in the closed session, but I think it's worth noting in public this is extremely challenging consultation now. Will be legislation, no doubt. We'll see what comes from the current consultation, but it's two aspects. One is moving from WPP, basically from a joint committee to an FCA approved company, and everything that entails, including employing people for the first time, etc. And then the moving every fund towards 100% being pooled, it is the more difficult asset classes which are left, and having both those by the same time scale of, I think it's March 26, is it, something like that?
Yes. Yeah.
It is extremely challenging, but I think the future, if we don't comply, might be more challenging for if we become perhaps a junior member of a larger pool outside of Wales. There's all sorts of issues there, including the opportunities for local investment, etc. So yeah, it's a very difficult scenario, and I know that officers are working on several work streams to try and get the best outcome for us. I think we perhaps leave it there for
Yes.
For this open session, Chris. And
yeah, agreed. Yeah,
unless anyone's got any burning questions at the moment.
Can't see any, so I'll push on then, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll get back to that.
Yes, we'll come back to that. Yeah. A couple of bits of information for board, really. New funding strategy statement guidance available. So when we prepare the funding strategy statement, the next valuation, we'll have to comply with the new guidance and be working with the actuary to make sure we do and produce a new funding strategy statement in the new format. 3.3 is just making board aware that there's been an update on the opinion around fiduciary responsibility or duty within the LGPS. We've seen increasing pressure from political groups over recent years in terms of our investments and investment strategies. The Scheme Advisory Board published a very helpful statement towards the end of last year, which I think I shared with the board at a previous meeting. They've had some further legal opinion, and they'll do a similar exercise for this latest legal opinion as well. So I'm expecting to see an updated statement or an updated useful document produced by the Scheme Advisory Board to help with fiduciary responsibility within the LGPS as well in the not too distant future.
While that is an updated opinion, it doesn't seem to change the opinion a great deal. It takes cognizance of new context, but basically has the same conclusion that LGPS are allowed to take non-financial considerations into account, as long as it wouldn't substantially be a bad thing for investments and scheme members, basically, I think.
Well, we're lucky we've got a lawyer on the call. So if Debbie wanted to click on that link, she would quite happily break it down to make it all understandable for us, if that's okay. And that link there, Debbie, is one that might be interested in. It's basically a legal document. Not that you've got time to have a look now, but I'm just pointing out that that's the official legal review. So lots of legal terminology in there, which is needs breaking down by the Scheme Advisory Board to make it more understandable for our committee members, for example, when they rely on this when dealing with our councillors. So
as usual, there are grey areas, Chris, and
probably
the judging in advance what's going to have significant detriment for investments is very difficult. With hindsight, it's easy, but yeah,
it is. Yeah. So sorry, Debbie, just a little comment there. So it's a legal document. If you're interested in that, can have a read. 3.6 is just to make the board aware that cost transparency is very, very important within the LGPS now. We want to know and understand where our costs when it comes to investments are going. And the Scheme Advisory Board are looking at a new way of doing that, or a different way of doing that. Understanding that it is really, really important. We need to be transparent when it comes to our investment costs. And there'll be some more work done on that over the coming months because they're looking at replacing the systems. 4 is something I just need to update board on, really. Pension dashboards is again a new government venture, which is to do with helping pension savers essentially go to one place to access all their pension information. It saves them having to log into the Powys system or however many other pension systems they might have. The pension dashboard will do the work for them. They'll log into that portal and it'll interrogate all the pension systems, bring it all into one place for them. Great idea in principle. Completely support that. But it does require some input from us as pension administrators into the ecosystem to make sure that our systems align. What happens when somebody puts in the wrong national insurance number, for example? We've got to make sure it doesn't feed back the wrong data and whatnot. So we're currently working with our software providers now on these sorts of parameters, matching criteria, essentially. If somebody puts in the correct surname, but the forename's the wrong way around, those sorts of questions, do we return that data? Do we hold it back? By being very strict on this, it could potentially lead to more queries for the team, because ultimately what will happen is if we lock it down tight, then it says contact your pension administrator to make sure this is correct. If we are too relaxed, you run the risk of giving somebody the incorrect data or even for somebody else. So we're just working through these parameters with our software providers now and carrying out some testing scenarios. So we want to make sure we get this right, obviously, because the GDPR potential risks for getting it wrong are significant. So it might be a case of we lock it down and we see how it goes. Does it generate a lot of inquiries? I don't know. We're in the testing phase at the minute. But the important thing for board to be aware of is there's a requirement for us to connect to this ecosystem by October 25. So another project we got to complete this year. And we're on target for that. As I say, we're working through the testing scenarios now. So I'm confident and comfortable with our progress around that implementation. And the rest are just information for board, really. Some hyperlinks to some documentation that the regulator and the pension dashboard project have produced. So that was it. I wasn't going to go through any more detail on this report, Chair. So hopefully board are okay with that, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I can't see any hands up at the moment, but you did jump over 3.4.
I did. You're right. Thank you, Chair. That's an important one. This is the point I was going to come back to earlier on, actually. So thank you for reminding me. So 3.4. This is just to let board know that the chair of the Scheme Advisory Board has written to chief financial officers and the chairs of pension committees in the LGPS at the administering authorities. There's a hyperlink to the letter there, basically saying it's important that you make sure that the pension funds are appropriately resourced. So to come back to your question earlier on, David, about resourcing, we carried out some work last summer with a third party to carry out an overall review of the funds to see where we sat against what we currently do and where we want to get to and were there any gaps. Now, as part of this review, there were 20 or so recommendations made on the outcome of this report. Some of them are really small, like you should have a policy document in place for this, you should have a guide in place for this to help with the team. But there were two significant recommendations, and they were both around resourcing, actually. One was to make a temporary adjustment to the structure that we put in place in March last year, permanent. And I should say committee agreed to this in October. So we're just working through inputting that structure into the Trent system at the minute, which is essentially we've got a group of administrators at the bottom of the structure acting up at the minute. So it's making that acting up permanent and just redesigning the bottom section of the structure to make sure the seats are there for these people to sit in correctly. The second one was around addressing some gaps, some areas that needed strengthening within how a modern pension fund, an LGPS fund, functions. And that was primarily around communications. It's a very complicated scheme. We've got to work with so many stakeholders, committees, boards, scheme members, employers. They identified that we could probably strengthen that because as part of this temporary restructure, we pulled our employer person from the employer relationship role into the admin team to strengthen the admin team. They quite rightly identified that you've now got a big gap where your employer liaison should be. So they recommended we do something to strengthen that. They recommended we strengthen our systems development, our governance resource. Comes back to your earlier point, David, about looking at the regulators code, our projects, and our training. We're quite unique in the LGPS in respect to the fact we have grown the team over recent years, the administration team. But LGPS experience is not something that's easy to come by. You have to develop it in-house. And we've really felt the pinch because we're the smallest admin team in Wales. We've grown the team, but what we found is obviously we have to bring in people who are inexperienced. So the people training these inexperienced people are our existing experienced people. So we've had a double whammy effectively. We've tried to grow because the caseload's been growing, but we've trained these. So we've lost productivity on the caseload from the experienced staff whilst they carried out the training. So they recommended we actually bring in an additional training resource to help with the training of the team. And this is where we're quite unique in the LGPS because of our size. We simply haven't got the people to be doing the training that we need. So they identified 6 areas that we needed to strengthen. And we've incorporated those 6 areas into 4 new posts. So committee at the end of October 2024 agreed to bring in 4 additional posts, which I'm very supportive of and grateful for. But it's important to remember that the pension fund is not funded in the same way that the council is. This resource is all funded via the pension fund and has no direct impact on the council's budget or resourcing. So we're quite unique within local government in terms of our funding. So it's just important to, whilst we are bringing in this additional resource, just to point out, it doesn't actually impact on the council's budget at all. It's all being funded by the pension fund. So yeah, we've had to grow the team to make sure we meet the expectations upon us now from the regulator, plus to make sure that we are able to deliver the service that we have to. And it's important as well to point out that these recommendations were made regardless of your membership size. It used to be the case with the LGPS was if you had 20,000 scheme members, you needed 10 people to run it. That's how it was. That's no longer the case now. And these recommendations were made. This is what you need to do from an organisational perspective, regardless of how many caseload you have. And in fact, what it did evidence is that we got the administration numbers correct. So we have been growing the admin team. We got that right. but we didn't really strengthen the area perhaps at the top of the structure, looking at the governance and the communications and the systems and whatnot. So yes, we have got some resource coming in, and we're currently working through just finalising the job descriptions and getting them graded and whatnot. So I'm expecting within the next few weeks we'll be able to go out to advert and try and get some additional resource in to the section. So that's the update in terms of our resourcing. Are there any questions on that at all from anybody?
I think from a board's perspective, our responsibility is to assist the scheme manager in making sure that the pension fund and the pension scheme are delivered effectively, and to support our staff that they don't burn out as well. So I think our perspective on this is that we would like to see Chris and the authority move forward to appoint these at the earliest possible time, so that we can address all these issues, that all the governance stuff and all the with evaluation, with everything that's going on with timescales for reorganisation of the pool and additional well, increasing the percentage funded through the pool or invested through the pool, etc. There's so many things that require attention in this sort of calendar year. I think the sooner the better we can get some additional resource. It's not going to be tomorrow, I understand that, but let's do it as soon as we can, really. And I know, Chris, you're probably balancing the need to do things today against oh, I can do this and get the staff in to do it tomorrow.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Chair. But I thought it was interesting the fact that the chair of the Scheme Advisory Board has actually written to the senior people within the funds, and that's not just Powys, that's nationally as well. So it's obviously an issue nationally that we're all feeling. So this has been an additional support to us, really, as to why we're doing it. So it's been a bit of reassurance for us.
Yeah, like we did cover this at the last meeting to a degree in terms of the resource and
Yes.
the funding stream, and both Dave and myself made it absolutely clear, and Jane did, that it's not coming from the council tax. It's largely coming from investment returns, etc. So and we're in a position, hopefully, to have a good type of scenario in terms of the contributions in the future may go down, as well as having the additional resource. So
Correct.
the impact on the employer should be positive on both axes.
And an improvement in service delivery, improved experience for our scheme members and the employers. That's the plan as well. So yeah.
But I do know that Gerard was worried before he left in the summer that we were putting perhaps too much responsibility on yourself, Chris. So not that we don't have faith in your ability, but you just don't have the time, and I think it's important to try and move ahead with these appointments when as soon as we can do practically.
Yeah, no, I agreed. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, if we're happy to move on, there's just one other item I did skip over briefly, which is 3.5, which is the first Scheme Advisory Board's annual review. So there's a hyperlink there. They've produced just a covering document of what they've been working on throughout the year and the plan for the next 12 months. It's an appendix as well, so it is on screen in front of you. I don't intend to take you through it. It's just these are some bullet points of what they've been working on. So you can see even at a national level, there's an awful lot going on. And will continue to go on. So it's just there for information, Chair. I just wanted to make board aware because it's not been produced before. So it's the first time.
No, useful to include that in the papers. Thanks, Chris. And yeah, we will take that appendix as for information. But I think before moving on, do other members what I said about the resources? Shall we ask the minutes to incorporate just a note to that effect, that we would support moving ahead with the resources at the earliest practicable opportunity?
Yeah, excellent idea, Chair. Yeah, I was raising my hand to say that we should note it in the minutes, and you've said that. So I think it's a strong message, and I think the level of involvement that Chris has got to have in some of the national responses and the other factors, I'm amazed how much it's changed in the 5 years when I knew it a lot better. And I think we need to strongly support the additional resource, which is a clear message that you're giving. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Well, we'll unless I see any dissenting voices, we'll assume everyone's in favour and ask Carrie Ann to note that message. Diolch, Chris.
I think register is next, Chair. I've got the agenda open, so if I'm incorrect,
yes,
it is.
Yeah.
Now, again, in the interest of time, the Chair and I did meet briefly about the risk register to try and speed up this process for the board. So perhaps should we take that approach if board are happy with that, just to identify a few things we identified? Are you okay with that, Chair?
Yes, sure. Yeah. Do you want me to go, or are you going to go?
No, please feel free to. Yeah, because if you've got your notes to hand, it'll save me having to just dig them out a few pages back. Yeah.
On the third risk on page 65 of the pack, page 1 of 5 of the register, there's a floating comment which is supposed to be somewhere else there on the right hand side. There
is. This is to do with cybersecurity training, actually, which we carried out very recently, and I've reflected on this one, actually, Chair, since we spoke. And one suggestion I'd make to board is I don't think we cover cybersecurity strongly enough in this risk register. I scanned through, and it's really in passing. I think we need to make sure that because the regulator is so focused on cybersecurity, rightly so, that we need to make sure we appropriately reference that within our risk registers as well. So one suggestion I was going to make off the back of this floating comment here, was that I go away and just revisit the cyber risk point and present it to board, and then we make a recommendation to committee that we strengthen it. Yeah.
Would that mean having an additional risk on the register specifically for cyber, Chris?
I think it's a case of I need to just revisit how we've worded it, and it might be an additional risk, or it might be a case I'm able to strengthen an existing one. I scanned through and it's really light, to be honest. So it probably will be its own specific individual risk. I think that's the right way to reflect it.
Yeah, fair enough. Keep on check.
So what I'd suggest is in that case is after we've been through this item, is that I revisit the risk register. I circulate it via email for board for comment, and if board are happy with that, I'll then take that version to committee for approval.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Can comment. The next one I picked up was on the following 2 pages. There's risks 5 and 6 with the rising employer contribution rates for employers. The first one is the strong covenant employers, and the second one is the weak covenants, but the comment is the same in both. That and on the right it mentions little can actually be done in mitigation due to the fact that liability is largely determined by bond deals, so it's outside of the fund's control. I think that's true on cessation, on crystallization of any employer.
Yeah.
But as an ongoing employer, and that's what we're talking about in terms of the contribution rates, I think that Aon, along with the other actuaries, have moved away from using bond yields as the determining factor for net present values, etc. So I think that those comments on those 2 risks need to be slightly updated again. And in the same way, I'd be happy to leave that with Chris to come back with new wording. You could fly that past someone in Aon just to confirm the new wording, perhaps.
Yeah, will do. That's fine.
And yeah, I think we're coming again to page 68 of the pack at the bottom there. We're talking about ceasing employers with no active members, and I was asking Chris a question: how many legacy employers we have without guarantors, etc. But I think we're covering that in an item in the next meeting. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah. So in terms of employee risk, I've been working with the actuary and have actually got the final report. They've carried out a risk review of our employers. So the intention is that that'll be presented to committee at the March meeting. So I can't remember the date, but so there'll be a risk review document taken to committee, and I think we should revisit these risks after that review has been in place. I'll share it with the board as well, so you can comment on it. But I think we should probably just defer changing these until we see what is the outcome of that risk review.
Yeah, we'll wait on that. So I think just from my experience, that getting guarantees for legacy employers who've been there for decades is nigh on impossible sometimes. But I think we're in a reasonably good place in Powys in terms of the Powys council will guarantee most of the small employers, but
Yeah,
that's not the case in some other schemes and funds. And
No,
the last one,
yeah,
I think,
sorry, that's fine.
on page 69 at the bottom there, with regard to payroll, I just thought that the risk score on that one was a bit high, with it being the highest risk in the whole pillar of the whole governance pillar of the register, and I was suggesting to Chris perhaps we reduce the 6 there. The impact if payroll doesn't work is huge, of course, but I think Dave probably will bear me out on this, that every treasurer, every authority, Section 151, the last thing they want to happen is for payroll not to work, and they will pull out all stops to get the payroll to work. And I think it's probably covered by some business continuity plans. So I think 6 as a sort of residual risk is perhaps a bit high, and perhaps we go for 4 on the residual. But,
Perhaps I might want to bring Graham in on this comment, but essentially this is saying worst case scenario is we're not able to pay our pensioners, and obviously with Graham being involved on the payroll side of things, there'll be business continuity plans and whatnot in place. So if anything happened, I'd also be on the phone to Graham straight away. But I think it's just, I think it's sensible to say there's mitigations in place to bring it down to 4. But if Graham, if you're able to add anything to some processes and whatnot when it comes to payroll.
Yeah, all payrolls that we run, including the pension fund, are run with days to spare, if you like, contingency days, so that if something did happen on a particular day, then we've always got the next 24, 36 hours anyway. The very final sort of, we'd work with our software supplier on that, and the emergency sort of contingency is a very, well, within 4 hours, basically, and resolution within I think it's 18 hours. So we put that contingency into in case of any issues. Ultimately, we've also got a little bit of time after that as well, prior to a normal pay run. And in normal circumstances, copies of BACS files from previous months can also be utilised. So there's a number of sort of steps within the business continuity that are in place, or assurances, really.
Yeah.
So I'd agree, really, that
the likelihood is pretty low, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few fallbacks there. Thanks, Graham. That's useful. I wasn't aware that the payroll was in your domain rather than finance. Sorry, but yeah. So I think that the 9 for the uncontrolled, I mean, it is doomsday if we're unable to pay people. But I think for the mitigated score, the current, I think, would you agree, Graham, that perhaps bring that down to 4 or something? From 6?
Yeah, I think based on the mitigations and the reassurances that we have, because it wouldn't just be the pension fund, it'd be the council affected by this as well. So there'd be a lot of people affected by this. I think it's appropriate to bring it down, but just you just need to agree on a score. Really, does 4 feel appropriate? I think that sits in the. There's a risk matrix table that the council uses. I just need to make sure it sits appropriately within that. But I think I think we can agree to bring it down. Yeah.
Do we want to note some of the things that Graham said in the document as well, in terms of the fallbacks, in terms of time and ability to go elsewhere and use previous.
I'll speak to Graham outside the meeting, perhaps,
Yeah,
and come up with some wording. Yeah.
You probably got something in a risk register for your own department, Graham.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, so yeah, I'll liaise with Chris outside the meeting, and yeah, as you say, we'll put the appropriate wording in, I think.
Just for completeness, that would be good. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, that completes the risk register from my perspective. Anyone else got anything you wish to? Otherwise, I thought it was reasonable and in the right place.
Well,
Okay.
this is one of the benefits of running it through the pensions board first. So the document that I now take to committee has had review by the pension board. It's a much stronger document as a result of it. So thank you very much for your input. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's good that we're doing this.
Yeah.
Every pillar separately, it bite-sized chunks as well. So good routine.
If I can share, the only thing I
Yeah.
just dig into what Graham has just said. I mean, a lot of the mitigations actually rest within the council, don't they, in terms of the
They do.
council's business continuity plan. And I just wondered if we needed to just reference that, perhaps strengthen the wording, and tie it more closely into the work that's done, because I recall, and I'm sure it is still the case, that Paris's risk management approach was really, really solid, really, really strong. And that's an additional level of assurance. But I also wanted to sort of just mention, I think that point around having a separate cyber security risk is key, because actually one of the key risks associated with payroll would be through a cyber attack. So I maybe that seems to me to be really important to have. I mean, maybe it's adequately covered elsewhere, but it's just a reflection. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
I think cyber risk is picked up on the administration pillar, I think, but we can certainly, I think it needs to sit on the governance one. So I'll leave that with me. I'll strengthen and produce a point, and we can get it right. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got some suggested amendments for Chris to take to the committee on that. And
Chair, sorry, can I just add there to around the cyber security? I think in the past, Chris, you've requested a copy of the of documentation from our software provider, our payroll provider, around their cybersecurity and ICT setup for purposes like this, haven't you? So certainly I can request an updated version of that, or the current version.
I think that'd
of
be
that.
helpful, yeah. So periodically, what Graham's referring to there is I periodically email our software providers, with Midland Trent payroll being one of them, and ask for their updated security certificates when it comes to the ISO. I can't remember the terminology, but so I did the same thing for all our software providers. So the admin system, they provide me annual updates in terms of their security as well. So I think it's probably worth us doing that, and we can include reference to whatever we need to within this risk as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone on that. I think we've got some good improvements to the risk register for Chris to suggest at the next committee. I'm conscious we've been going for over an hour, but we've got about 2 or 3 quick items before we go to the closed section. So perhaps we can run through those before taking a short break, Chris. And the next one, training needs, is a very short one, I think, isn't it?
It is very short. It's just to say it's that time of year where I'll be sending out the forms just to ask you to fill out your questionnaire in terms of your knowledge. If you can complete them as soon as possible, I'll build a training matrix for the board. I do the same thing with committee. Just say the form will follow this meeting. So please can I ask you to complete the training needs analysis when it comes to you.
Yeah, on training needs, I think it's a legislative requirement for board members to be trained for the purpose. So I think if anybody fancies swatting up on some training before doing the training needs analysis in Marchish, it might come. The pensions regulator has a sort of toolkit which will allow people to sort of do a multiple choice training online on, there's about a dozen different aspects, I think, there of pension schemes operations, and covers everything from investment, admin, governance, and the likes. It's a while since I did it, but it can be done in bite-sized chunks of quarter of an hour every evening if someone fancies doing it that way. So if you fancy being more agenda before doing the training needs analysis, that's one way to go forward. Perhaps you could share the
will do,
link,
yeah.
Chris.
It's a free tool. It's, again, it's a few years since I've done it as well, but it's modular based, so you can just chip away at it essentially. So, yep, I'll share the link so you can have a look at it in your own time then. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone happy to do the training needs analysis? I don't think we've got much choice, to be honest, in legislatively required to do so. So, yeah, WPP updates. I think this one, we've talked a little, but this is the business as usual WPP updates, and there is a lot of information here. But having said that, I think it's generally good news in terms of the investment returns for the quarter, etc. And nothing earth-shattering in terms of changes in this. The changes are, of course, on the horizon for the future. So I don't know, Chris, rather than running through it, shall we ask, are there any questions, and note the paper if not, but or is there something you'd like to
No.
bring to attention specifically?
No, this, as board will be aware, this should be familiar. It's the regular document I bring. If there's something within the documents that I want to bring out, I usually bring it out at this moment, rather than going through it page by page, because you say there's lots there. There's nothing that I want to draw out on this occasion, so it's just all presented for information, this one, Chair.
Yeah, there was no new bad news there at all, so I'm quite happy, and I can't see any hands up on the list in front of me. Are we happy to? I think it's important for us to receive this. It's you know, some of those figures do mean a lot to us in terms of impact. So impact on the fund's financial status. So yeah, it's good to do the monitoring, but it's primarily the committee's concern, and yeah, and we're happy with to note the progress, I think. So yeah, we'll move on to unless anyone shouts, the next item, which standing items. Chris, I don't think there's much to report under this one either.
No, I'm just scrolling down to it. Obviously, there was a lot with the WPP, wasn't it? So yeah, study items, no new breaches have been recorded. So there's no need for me to bring anything to board's attention to discuss whether it's recordable or reportable. So it is as it was. No appeal cases and no audit reports have been received in the period either. So it's literally just for information.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, we'll note that then. Again, no hands up. So the next item is are we in? I'm just trying to.
So I think that's the last item for the public.
It is, isn't it? Our future board meetings, we just note those, don't we?
Oh yes, yeah.
I'm happy with those dates. I hope if anyone isn't, shout and we can look to be flexible perhaps, but hopefully note those and get them in our diaries for future attendance. So at that point, as we've been going just over an hour and a quarter, shall we leave it at that point and have a coffee and come back? It's 10:47 on my screen. So we aim to be back by 10:55. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's okay. Do we just need to ask? That's okay to go into the confidential section first, Chair?
Yeah, if you like. Yeah. Can we go? Can we I'll propose that we go into confidential session as we're dealing with matters that could be sensitive, commercially sensitive. And